Oh, we're live. Hi, Anne-Marie Triolo coming to you from Triolo Realty Group. I kind of wanted to do a follow-up video from the last video that I did last week regarding the change in the market. The feedback I've been getting is that there's a lot of frustrated buyers out there. They're frustrated with the high prices that they're dealing with. A lot of them feel like they just never going to be able to buy a house. They can't afford it. They can't afford the down payment. The prices of the homes that they want, the detached homes and whatnot, are just out of range for them, and they're just kind of throwing in the towel. There was an article also this morning that I saw came out in the Staten Island Advance that says that we're in a full-blown buyer's market. I don't agree with it. I don't think that we're in a full-blown buyer's market. Like I had said in my last video, I still think that we're in that cushy middle ground right now. Although we're no longer in a seller's market. Again, because of the frustrations that a lot of buyers are having, that means that the reins aren't being held by them either, because they're finding that they can't afford a lot of. So we're in that mushy middle ground. So a couple of things that I wanted to go over. I get the frustration that buyers are having. They're feeling like they can't afford things. But you really have to, especially if you're a first-time buyer, I want you to kind of really wrap your brain around the fact that you're paying rent right now. Right now, you're paying somebody else's mortgage. That's money that you are absolutely never going to see again. And although you probably had your hopes on, buying maybe that one-family detached home, now you have to kind of adjust what it is that you're looking for. You have to kind of make that compromise. And just keep in the back of your mind that maybe that compromise is only for a couple of years. So, if you're at that price point where you could only afford $450, $500, and you're finding that buying a detached home, especially in Staten Island, is not going to fall into that price range, then look for the semi-attached, look for the townhouse. Because if you keep into the back of your mind that you're going to purchase something that's in your price point, at least when you're paying that mortgage, it's kind of like putting up, money in the bank. Granted, some of it's going to, a large portion of it's going to interest and whatnot, but at least you're building equity in the home that you have. And then eventually, also, if you hold on to it for a couple of years, the prices will appreciate. I'm going to go back to what I said in the last video, and I'm going to hold strong to it. I don't think that there's going to be a crash. I think that the appreciation of homes are just slowing down. They're at a much slower pace, because at the last 3 years, they were just at this aggressive pace that was changing literally on a week-to-week basis. That's not happening right now, but it's still going to appreciate. So if you buy yourself the semi-attached house or the townhouse, maybe the 2-bedroom instead of the 3-bedroom, you will build value again, and you will eventually, it's kind of like putting money in the bank. So then a couple of years down the line, you could then sell that house and then use that down payment to go and buy yourself that detached home that you were looking for nowadays. So that's just one aspect. Another thing is about mortgages. Here's the thing about mortgages, right? For the last 3 years, one of the contributors to this aggressive appreciation of home values has been cash buyers. We've had a lot of foreign money coming into the country. They were buying cash. If they weren't buying cash, they were buying with upwards of 50, 60% down, 40% down. They were aggressive buyers. So, and there was such a huge influx of them that it caused them, the market to really start to spike. Hi, Jamie. Hi, Alicia. So that was one of the contributors. That's no longer a contributing factor anymore. Those aggressive cash foreign buyers are pretty much kind of gone at this point. The government has put a cap on what they're allowed to bring into the country. So they're no longer able to, to outright buy cash. So, my 3.5% buyers, my 5% buyers, my 10% down buyers, my 20% down buyers, you have leg room now. Now you're able to go in and you're not battling with, 10 other cash offers and getting outbidded. So you have a stand again, okay? So take advantage of that. My FHA buyers, the ones, or even my under 10% buyers that are, complaining about PMI. PMI sucks. We all know PMI sucks. It tacks on another couple, $400 or $500. It could tack on a month to your mortgage payment, and that sucks. We all, we hate it. But there's ways of offsetting that. If you just speak to a mortgage person, you could find ways of offsetting that. For example, if let's say you're a 5% down buyer, consider probably putting down 3.5% and using that extra money that you would have put towards your down payment. Use that money to go buy down points. So, on average, it costs about 1% to buy down a quarter point. Everybody's going to be different, so these are just average numbers. But on average, it'll cost you about 1% to buy down a quarter point of your interest rate. So buying down that quarter point can help you offset the amount of money that you're going to be paying in PMI, right? So it won't hurt your pocket as severely as it would have if you're just outright paying the PMI. Sellers concessions. Sellers concessions before this aggressive market were a huge factor in how people were buying houses. They were using sellers concessions in order to pay for their closing costs, right? Sometimes 3% sellers concessions. What's a sellers concession? A sellers concession is when, let's say, you need an extra $15,000 to put towards your closing costs and you don't have that kind of cash and you'd rather incorporate it into your mortgage. So what would happen is, let's say you're buying a house for $450 and you need that $15,000 to put towards your closing costs. When you put your offer in, you would ask the seller for a seller's concession. That would mean that on paper with the bank knows it's not like you're doing something illegal, but the bank sees, okay, you're asking for a $465 rather than the $450, so you're incorporating your mortgage costs. The only catch-22 with that is that even though you're actually buying the house for $450 and $15 is going towards your closing costs, the house has to actually appraise for the $465. Okay, so that's the only catch-22 in that. Why some sellers would disagree with it. In going prior to 3 years ago, sellers concessions were we did a lot of them, especially with VA loans, which were 100% financing. No money down and their sellers concessions to incorporate all closing costs. I was doing a lot of those back in the day. But in the last 3 years, sellers concessions kind of took a back seat and we weren't really utilizing them anymore because the prices were climbing so fast, and houses were selling at market value, and when the appraisers were going in there and appraising these houses, literally, every 2-3 weeks, these prices were changing so rapidly that we didn't have that wiggle room for the seller's concession. So if a house sold at $500,000 and you needed that extra $15,000 for your seller's concession, we weren't getting that appraisal to come in at $515 because maybe a month ago the houses had just sold for $475, so we already had that climb up there. So the house wouldn't appraise, and therefore the deal could either go sour, or the seller would have to come down on their price, or the buyer would have to come up with that now $15,000 cash in order to pay for those closing costs. I'm hoping that all makes sense to you. You can kind of replay this back if it doesn't, and don't hesitate to post some questions in the comments. I'll get back to you after the video. I have no problem explaining this all. I know it's a lot. My brain goes in 52 different directions, and I try to break it all down Elmo style for a lot of people to understand, because the layperson who's not in real estate really doesn't grasp a lot of this stuff. So those are different things that you can do, incorporating. So again, let's get back to seller's concessions. If they're starting to find their way back into the market again, you could also try to use a seller's concession to get some money for your closing costs. And if you already had money for your closing costs, maybe use that money to, again, buy down some points in order to bring your interest rate down, in order to make up for the PMI that you're paying. In conferring with Sal Criscuolo, he's one of my mortgage guys that I use regularly. I was talking to him this morning, and another point that he had brought up that I thought was also a great point to relay to you guys is that when it comes to PMI, there's ways. And speak to your mortgage person about that. There's ways of buying out your PMI up front. and getting rid of it all front with a payment. You know, everybody's going to be different. Every, you know, individual, every loan is going to be different. So how, you know, what those numbers are, I can't really kind of tell you, but it's something to discuss with them. And the other way to do it too is that the bank could actually buy out your PMI as well. The only, you know, catch with that is that you'd be paying at a higher interest rate. Okay, so you know, these are just a little bit of tips. I don't want you buyers to be so discouraged thinking that, you know, I'm just not going to get a house. You know, when you're paying somebody else's mortgage, you know, it's penny wise, pound foolish, right? Because you're never going to see that money again. If you're paying your own mortgage, at least, you know, a portion of it is kind of like a savings. And you're also going to be living in a property that's going to appreciate eventually. And that's going to give you more money for your next down payment on your next house. So that should be your compromise. If you can't afford that $700,000 house now, and it's something that you really want, hold off on it. Hold off on it for a couple of years. But don't sit back and do nothing and buy nothing, you know, because you're again pissing money away for the next 3 years in rental. So you're better off compromising, buying something smaller, buying something that you could afford, and saving that money in order to a couple of years buy, you know, upgrade. So those are my tips. Again, I'm always here. Anybody wants, you know, any answers for any questions, mortgage related, house buying related. Don't ask me about hair related because I got gray hairs right now. I have no time to dye my hair, so don't ask me questions about hair. But any other questions, I'm always here to help, and I love you guys, and I hope to hear from you soon. Peace.